Let them praises give Jehovah. They were made at his command. Them forever he established. His decree shall ever stand. From the earth, oh, praise Jehovah. All ye floods, ye dragons all. Fire and hail and snow and vapor, stormy winds that hear him call. Let them praises give Jehovah, for his name alone is high. And his glory is exalted. And his glory is exalted. And his glory is exalted, far above the earth and sky.
Okay. Charles?
Doing great.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good to see you. So much is being done here by the Christians here in Ennis. And not only this congregation, we see if you walk through the gym area, the Family Life Center, you see that flooring that's been redone and still being worked on. Gary's organized that. The lawn always looks good. The parking, so much there, and then individuals that are helping out with the down the hill country, and then other works that Christians are involved with. It reminds me of what John writes in Revelation: "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them." And so a lot of works that are being done. Some are behind the scenes we don't even know about, and others that are very, very evident. This morning we're continuing chapter 14. If you need a handout, we started this last week. We'll pick up on page 3. So if you have your handout from last week, or if you need one, we have several there. So we're in about the middle of page 3. Chapter 14, 4c. These have been redeemed from mankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb. Well, so that we can be reminded who these are, we'll back up to page 1, where verses 1 through 3 introduce us to these. Then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name. And we emphasized that here is the unity of Jesus the Son and God the Father. And it's nothing new. John spoke about this when he wrote his gospel. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then in chapter 14, verse 6, when John says that I am the way, the truth, and the life, he quotes Jesus. He says, no one comes to the Father but by me. Hey, Mike. Good to see you. Good to see you up and around. So here is the Lamb and the Father. And that is going to be repeated by John. We'll see in this chapter. They had their names written on their foreheads, and I heard a voice from heaven like the roar of many waters, and like the sound of loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. They were singing a new song before the throne, and before the 4 living creatures, and before the elders. No one could learn that song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. And so that leads us into where we are in verse 4. These have been redeemed from mankind. We've already discussed the 144,000, the symbolism there of the tribes of Israel, the salvation that God was providing through his means in the Old Testament, Israel, and then the 12 apostles and their work in making known God's Word. And so the 12 times 12 times 1,000, that perfection and completeness, gives us that 144,000. So that's one way of viewing that, rather than a literal number of people who are saved. But the interesting thing here is they had been redeemed from mankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb. There we see that repetition of God and the Lamb. The 144,000 were redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. We saw that back in chapter 1 and chapter 5. The description as first fruits for God and the Lamb argues, it seems to me, for a first century interpretation. Because first fruits would not really apply to a distant group of saints and Christians. They would be the latter fruits. We are not first fruits. We are 2,000 years removed from the first century. We are the latter fruits. We're still saved, but that's different from the first fruits. Who are the first fruits? Those are the Jewish Christians. And so we see this interpretation fits with the verses that inform the readers that the events in Revelation were soon to take place. We saw that in chapter 1, verse 1, verse 3. Then we'll see it in chapter 22, verses 6 and 12. And so the Jewish Christians seem to be described as the first fruits, in the sense that the Jews were the first to hear the gospel and obey the gospel. In Acts chapters 2 through 9, and then we see also in Romans 1:16 where Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It's the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. And so there we see a bringing together by Paul that the power of the gospel to save all. But the Gentiles did not hear the good news until about 10 years after Pentecost. We see that in Acts chapter 10. So the Jews were the first Christians, hence they are the first fruits. Cornelius and his household will be the first Gentiles to become Christians. That's recorded in Acts chapters 10 and 11. And for that to happen, for all the world to be saved, the gospel has to go forth. And that's exactly what Jesus said would happen. He said, you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth. And so there we see the taking of the gospel. So that brings us to still chapter 4, now on page 4, chapter 14, now on page 4. We've seen this earlier. On page 4, yes. Top of page 4.
So we're in chapter 14, what verse?
Page 4, at the top of the page. We're in chapter 14 and still in verse 4.
Still in verse 4. Okay.
And we've seen this earlier, that John will apply themes from the Old Testament in writing, and the Holy Spirit guides him in the writing of the Revelation. There's a passage that from Jeremiah that is reminded of as we look at this 14, verse 4. Jeremiah said, go and proclaim in the hearing of Jerusalem, thus says the Lord, I remember the devotion of your youth, your love as a bride. There we see in that metaphor that God used for his relationship with his people. He says, you are a bride to me, and I'm your husband, meaning I provide for you, I care for you. But as time goes on, this bride proves to be unfaithful, plays the harlot. In fact, that's what John will reveal, the harlotry that Jerusalem was involved with. And therefore, God is sending a decree of divorce. He will have a new bride, a pure bride, a righteous bride, adorned in glory and righteousness. So, I remember your devotion, your love as a bride, how you followed me in the wilderness in a land not sown. Israel was holy to the Lord, the first fruits of his harvest. Jeremiah is saying there was a time when Israel was holy, but she has become unrighteous. She's played the harlot, and Babylon is going to take her into captivity. But they were the first fruits of his harvest. The next verse, we read, in their mouth no lie was found, for they are blameless. And so another idea of this first fruits carries the connotation of holiness, consecration, belonging to God, set apart. And that's what this verse illustrates, which is similar to what James refers to in James chapter 1 and verse 18. Someone care to read that passage this morning?
Of his own will he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So, salvation is not simply being saved from sins. It's being saved in order to be identified with God as God's people, God's child, reflecting God, the first fruits, bearing the same fruit that God, who produces us, wants to have it brought to bear within us. And so the idea of first fruits is very, very important. It was the Jews, the Jewish Christians first of all, and they're the ones that are going to be first impacted by this destruction that's soon to come in Jerusalem and throughout Judea. That brings us to the next portion. That's the three angels that John introduces us to, and the message of judgment. Here in chapter 14, we'll read verses 6 through 12. I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven, having an eternal gospel to preach to those who live on the earth, to every nation and tribe and tongue and people. And he said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heaven and the earth and sea and springs of waters." And another angel, a second one, followed, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality." Then another angel, a third one, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and his image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. They have no rest day and night, those who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. Here is the perseverance of the saints who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus." So three angels here. The angel of evangelism. First, the gospel is to be preached. The gospel is to go forth. There is to be evangelism that takes place to the good news, the calling out of the good news. I saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people. The adjective eternal describes the gospel. It was not a temporary gospel. It was not a gospel that would be replaced. It's not a gospel that would be changing. It would not be superseded by another message as has come in through the centuries. New passages, people say, "Oh, I just received a revelation. God has revealed this to me. You don't need this anymore. I have a new word." It's the eternal gospel, that good news of salvation in Jesus Christ. There is no other need for another good news. There is no other good news. There is no other message. And anything that says less than that says too little. Anything that says more than that says too much. And anything that says, "Well, our message is just the same as the gospel." If it's the same as the gospel, it's not needed. And so here is the message. I saw another angel flying overhead, an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on the earth, and to every nation, tribe, language, and people. Well, how are we to understand that? Muslim Terry is of the opinion that the proclaiming of the gospel unto those who dwell on the land may refer to the first preaching of the apostles to the Jews of Palestine, as distinguished from the later proclamation of Christ to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, after it became manifest to the Jewish Christians that the Gentiles are also to be recipients of eternal life. We see that in Acts chapter 11. We know that the first century Jewish diaspora scattered the Jewish population in 70 AD. That dispersion led to the formation of many Jewish communities throughout the Roman Empire. As Jewish Christians fled and settled, they took the gospel with them. What Jesus said was to be taken to all nations. "Go ye therefore and teach all nations," Jesus said in the Great Commission. Baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach them to observe all things that I've commanded you. So there is that purpose of the gospel to spread, and it begins there at Jerusalem, and then it spreads through Judea and Samaria and through that part of the world. On the Mount of Olives, you remember that Jesus warned of an imminent judgment that was coming on Jerusalem. Jewish Christians, having obeyed the gospel, that power of God into salvation, were assured of eternal hope, of eternal salvation, an eternal home in heaven. I believe that's regarding those Jews, those Jewish Christians, that Jesus states in Matthew 24:31 in that Mount Olivet discourse, that he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now that verse 31, it's tempting to apply that to the end time, to the conclusion of all things when Christ returns and the eternal judgment. However, the context doesn't speak of the end time. In fact, just a few verses later, Jesus will say, this generation will pass away, but you've seen all these things take place. And so the context, again, seems to refer back to Jerusalem, that attack, and the collapse of the city, and the desecration of the temple. So, but that's my opinion. But it seems that that context of 70 AD, you have to lift it up out of that to get to the end time. Now, there will be the end time. There will be the coming, and Paul talks about this, that he'll come with the voice of the archangel, the trumpet of God. Dead in Christ will rise first. Then we that are alive and remain, we caught together with him and meet the cloud in the air, the Lord in the air. So shall we ever be with the Lord. So there is that teaching, but I don't think that Revelation deals with that, or with Matthew 24 deals with that. Yes.
I was just going to say that, probably most of you guys here know and heard of premillennialism. And I don't know if y'all know what that is or not. But it is a teaching today of two different resurrections. Or the first bit of Christians, or no, I'm sorry, I'm getting that mixed up with Christ coming back to earth to establish his kingdom and to be on the earth for 1,000 years. That's what they call premillennialism. That is a type of religion that is going around today. And they get a lot of that from later on in another chapter where it's talking about...
Yeah, those are excellent points, Mike, and we'll be getting that actually when we get to chapter 20, which is the only place that 1,000 years is mentioned. But yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Jesus, when he was speaking, talked about the fact that not one jot nor tittle will pass away until all is fulfilled.
Yeah.
And when all is fulfilled is his death, burial, and resurrection. So even though he basically is saying how important the Old Testament is, he's going to fulfill everything that the Old Testament is teaching about. So there is a separation here, so that we have the New Testament, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, and subsequently that we follow. And I think that's important. Jesus himself said that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like it'll be the ultimate victory.
Yeah. Okay, so he says with a loud voice in verse 7, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water. That coming judgment on Israel at the hands of Rome is the theme that John has been following throughout Revelation. The time is soon. The theme is judgment is coming. There will be the Lord coming. You will see him, and those who pierced him will acknowledge that. So it seems to be limited to that time of the first century. Jesus spoke of the desolation that was coming in Luke's account of that Mount Olivet discourse. Luke chapter 21 through 24. If someone would care to read that passage for us.
When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those who are inside the city depart. And let not those who are out in the country enter it. For these are days of vengeance, to fulfill all that is written. Alas for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days, for there will be great distress upon the earth and wrath against this people. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive among all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled.
Thank you. There is again a temptation to lift that up and apply it to end time. And yet when we harmonize Luke's account with Matthew's account, Jesus said in Matthew 24:34, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. And so again, that seems to limit that to the first century as far as this prophecy and Jesus' words about what was about to take place in the generation of those that were living at that time. Now, Foy Wallace, he concludes this, that the events anticipated by Jesus, spoken of on Mount Olivet and here in Revelation 14, are actually the same events. He says the angels were the same, the evangelistic mission is the same, the gospel message is the same, the symbolism is the same, and the period of the visions covered are the same. That is the time of the trial and tribulation of the churches during that war against Jerusalem with all the events connected to it, with that collapse of Jerusalem, the fall and the destruction of the temple, and what would come later with the persecution of the Christians because of that opposition that was taking place. So there's that. The first angel is the angel of evangelism, the first fruits that are being brought into salvation. There's a second angel. We see in 14 verse 8. The downfall of Jerusalem is imminent. Here is the second angel of calamity. Once holy Jerusalem has become unholy. And God describes his holy city as now being Babylon. The unholy, corrupt, perverted Babylon. That's the terminology. Listen to chapter 14, verse 8. Another angel, here's the angel of calamity, followed, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. Jerusalem had played the harlot, but also had influenced others to play the harlot, to go against God in her actions. And this second angel is the messenger of catastrophe, of doom. And it's a vivid description of what is going to take place because of Jerusalem's apostasy. Refer back to chapter 11 where we saw that great city that symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. There's no misunderstanding what the city is that John's talking about. It's not some future city. It's not some worldwide city or metropolis. It's the city where the Lord was crucified. So that pinpoints it to Jerusalem. The Jewish hearers, they were familiar with God's judgment on Babylon. It had been prophesied by Isaiah. And as we've noted in writing Revelation, John frequently refers to Old Testament apocalyptic images and applies those images in Revelation. Here in Isaiah chapter 13, for example, there are several passages. Someone would care to read that first passage, and then someone else maybe the second, and someone else the third and the fourth, so we can kind of share that. Unless you'd like to read it all, that'd be fine too. But the first one, Isaiah prophesies of the doom that's coming on literal Babylon. In fact, he names it. There's no misunderstanding or wondering, questioning who is he referring to. So if someone would like to read some of those passages, please.
The oracle concerning Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos saw. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. As destruction from the Almighty it will come. Therefore all hands will be feeble, and every human heart will melt. They will be dismayed. Pangs and agony will seize them. They will be in anguish like a woman in labor. They will look aghast at one another. Their faces will be aflame.
Thank you. Let's look at some of those terms that Isaiah used, the apocalyptic language. Every human heart will melt. There'll be pangs and agony. There'll be an anguish. Their faces will be aflame. If we take that literally, which we do not, but there are some interpretations that lift that up as literal prophecy, we'd say, well, that certainly speaks about a nuclear war, doesn't it? So we can look at Isaiah prophesied there'd be a nuclear holocaust. People's faces are going to be on fire. Well, Isaiah already says this is an oracle concerning Babylon. So it's not something that'd be far distant, so it lifts it out of its context again to make some futuristic application. These are figurative languages of destruction. They're symbols, not to be taken literally. Okay, so...
I have a question.
Yeah, sure, Sam.
So why is it sometimes it means what it says, like, when you're talking about that pinpointed Jerusalem and whatnot, and then why is it other times, well, it doesn't mean what it says?
Well, I think it means what it says.
But,
it's just that it's not a literal fulfillment. It means it.
Things it'll say, like, the 144,000. Well, that doesn't mean what it says. But then we'll read another passage and it says that means what it says. How do we know what?
That's an excellent question and very relevant question. It concerns the type of literature that we're reading. It's like when we read poetry, we don't necessarily think that my love is like a red, red rose that Robert Burns speaks of. We don't see my love as a rose. It means there's a figure. It's like that. And so in God's words, there's books of history that are taken very literally. There's books of poetry, the Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. We definitely look at those and see those aren't literal teachings in that. They have a message that's literal. The message is follow God. The message is there will be punishment for the evildoers. But it's not to be taken in a literal sense as far as that fulfillment of it that's real, though. And then there's apocalyptic language, where God shows great, horrific examples of what will take place in the destruction of the evil and the great blissfulness of heaven. So the truth is there. It's a matter of being able to interpret that truth, whether it's written in symbolic terms, as I think Isaiah is, or in literal terms, which we see in the books of history and in the Gospels even. We see Jesus going, and that wasn't a figure. Jesus went. We see the cross. That wasn't a symbol. Jesus died. So that was literal. So it's a matter of studying, and then also it comes to our approach. If we approach the Bible believing that there's going to be a 1,000-year reign, then that's going to inform the way I interpret every verse. Say, well, see, that supports that 1,000-year reign there. Whereas,
that's one of the reasons why I brought it up.
Yeah.
Kind of lead into what you're saying.
Yep.
You have to. I can't explain it.
Yep.
I was getting to that point.
Yeah, exactly right. So how we view the Bible and our approach to it will inform us also as far as how we interpret that. But there's definitely apocalyptic language and literal language.
And there's so many different views on Revelation that brought up so much false teaching. And we as Christians have to be aware of that, because if we do not understand it in the truth, then we can be misled.
Well, there are a lot of different ways of viewing it, but we must.
Each time people talk about, and see, it's so easy to mislead us, because people talk about, oh, this means this is the end of time. Jesus is to be coming soon. But we can't let those people mislead us into thinking the way that they're thinking. We have to know the truth And as long as you know the truth, you won't get misled.
The danger of thinking about all these other things that are possibilities is you just get so confused. And if you have the truth, you study the truth and you follow the truth, and you don't get so involved in all these other things that you get confused. A good example, the Statue of Liberty used to be called the Great Colossus until Emma Lazarus won the competition about the poem about this great Colossus, and she talked about liberty. And so the statue is now Statue of Liberty.
Yep.
Okay? So this is a symbolism that has stuck. And we don't worry about the great Colossus. Nobody knows about that.
Yeah. It's been forgotten.
One thing that I would like for you to share, because Charles has definitely put in a lot of effort and everything, but I stopped counting at how many books, about 55 that he ordered, and it's more like probably 70 or 75. Of that, there are all different views that he's reading and everything, but what would your estimate be out of that number? How many are supporting what you're sharing with us and talking to us about right now?
Okay, by and large, the predominant view for the last 100 years has been toward the premillennial, and most commentaries deal with it from that. I would say, getting back to this idea that having a fundamental knowledge of truth is what is so important, and we arrive at truth by the clear passages of the New Testament. For example, the idea of a kingdom that's yet to be established for 1,000 years contradicts what the New Testament teaches about the kingdom already being in existence. And so when we interpret apocalyptic language or symbolic language, seems to me the best rule to follow is don't interpret it in a way that's going to contradict the clear passages. Let the clear passages, the literal passages, interpret the symbolic passages, rather than casting out those original literal passages in order to come up with a symbolic interpretation that contradicts it. So, anyway, that being said, the next passage here is Isaiah 13, 9 through 10.
Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land a desolation and to destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of the heavens and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be dark at its rising, and the moon will not shed its light.
Okay, thank you. And again, we see the terminology that is very, very common, repeated in Revelation: the constellations, the sun, the moon. The next passage, Isaiah 13:17, Isaiah states what God is about to do. If someone would like to read that one passage.
Behold, I am stirring up the Medes against them.
I'm stirring up the Medes. This gets back to what Daniel will write about when he interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And he says, there are kingdoms. You, O king, are the head of gold. There will be another kingdom after you. That will be the Medo-Persians. So that's what Isaiah is saying. God is saying, I'm sending the Medes against you. After the Medo-Persians, there will be the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great. It will fall, and Rome will ascend. And Daniel says, quotes God, in the days of those kings, the Roman kings, the God of heaven will establish his kingdom, which will never be destroyed. And so this falls in line with what Daniel prophesied. The Medes are coming against them. And then the final passage, chapter 13 of Isaiah, verse 19. Someone care to read that, please?
In Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the splendor and pomp of the Chaldeans, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah, when God overthrew them.
Okay, thank you. So they'll be like Sodom and Gomorrah. Before we turn the page, go back to the top of the page where chapter 11, verse 8 of Revelation, this great city, Jerusalem, that symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where the Lord was crucified. The Jews are very familiar with Sodom and Gomorrah, that God overthrew them. And he says Babylon will be overthrown just like that. And now to John's audience, he says Jerusalem will be overthrown just like that too, because of the immorality. Jerusalem has become corrupt, just like Babylon, and she is the Sodom of today in John's time. Okay, in Revelation 17 and 18, the city Jerusalem is likened to Babylon. In Isaiah chapter 14, the city of Babylon is likened to none other than Satan. Now, in chapter 14, verses 2 and 4, Isaiah does the same thing that he does in Isaiah chapter 13, verse 1. He identifies the prophecy relates to Babylon. So there's no misunderstanding who the target is of this prophecy. It's Babylon and the coming captivity. Someone care to read that passage that we have there?
How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, and you have laid nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. Above the stars of God, I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. Those who see you will stare at you and ponder over you. Is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms?
Okay, thank you. The prophecy is stated by Isaiah concerning Babylon. Exodus chapter 13:1 and 14:4. Some commentaries go so far as to lift that prophecy from its context and apply it, I believe mistakenly, to Satan. They say, well, this shows how Satan, he ascended to heaven but was cast down. Well, we know he fell, but it wasn't what Isaiah was referring to. So Isaiah says it's related to Babylon. There are three major reasons, it seems to me, why John refers to Jerusalem as Babylon. It's the way they treated God's prophets. We see this in Matthew 23 referred to. The rejection and the murder of God's Son, their own Messiah, Matthew 27. And the subsequent persecution of the Christians and the apostles, Acts chapters 4 through 12 and then Acts 21 through 25. Jerusalem had become a Babylon. Not literally, but symbolically. A replica of the proud, idolatrous, persecuting oppressor of God's people. David Chilton brings that point out. So here we see the angel of evangelism. The word is to go forth. The angel of the calamity that's coming. And now we see the third angel, the angel of judgment. The apostate Jewish aristocracy is going to be judged as a beast. And the beast of the sea, Rome, will eventually not only be the instrument for that, but eventually itself will collapse. So John's message is that God's judgment is coming, and it's coming against all who worship the beast and receive his mark. That identification point.
There's a mark that was applied when the patent system started. I don't know if you're in agreement with me about that, because I've got a lot of historical facts about the Inquisitions. When they started with Rome, and that was, we're going to get into that a little later on. Sorry, I'm probably getting my head again.
Well, that mark is what allowed the people in Jerusalem to do business.
And see, and you can Google it on Google. Anybody can. I've done it and I've read it. And it talks about, Rome after it fell, and then it was helped by the papal system to rise up again. And then Rome was basically split like in the east and the west. And I can't remember the year, in the 300s or something like that was when the Inquisition period started. Because that's when the people received the mark. Because if you look at in history and on Google, you can read, it'll tell you all about how the papal system had men appointed to go through the nation looking for Jews and Muslims and to bring them to the Catholic Church and make them become Catholics, and if they didn't, they wouldn't get the mark, and then they would force them out of the country. And that started first in the east, and then...
Well, that will take place centuries and centuries after the first century.
This mark here, I'm wondering what mark that's talking about.
Yeah. Well, we actually covered that a few weeks ago, but
I probably wasn't here.
Maybe not. It was. We don't have an identification about what the mark actually was, but it was some way to identify the individuals who would worship the beast, Nero, as God. And if they did that, they'd be permitted to do business, have commerce.
Yeah,
if they didn't...
That was similar to the Inquisition, and they would put the mark on the people that were Jews and Muslims and...
Well, all through history, individuals... All through history, powerful entities have put marks on individuals. What did the Nazis do to the Jews in Germany? Yeah, they put a mark there, indicating these are enemies. So, but what we're doing is going all the way back to the first century and seeing these were Christians who would not worship another God. They worshiped Jesus, and therefore they didn't receive a mark. Those who did worship Nero, they got the mark. And that's what John is saying. Another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and his image and receives a mark on his forehead or his hand, he will drink the wine of God's wrath." So that previous verse had announced the fall of the second beast, the apostate Jerusalem and the religious leaders, religious aristocracy, who were doing the bidding of the first beast, pagan Rome and Nero, and causing the people to worship the Roman emperor. And therefore they could do business. They could buy sacrifices. For a Jew, if they were prohibited from engaging in commerce, that limited them also from their worship. They couldn't buy the sacrificial animals to bring. And so it was they were being ostracized from society. So this series of verses from Revelation 14:9 through 11 speaks to the doom that's coming of all who worship the beast and return and receive that mark. The faithful Jewish Christians would not worship the beast and therefore were persecuted, some even to the point of death for their faith. And I believe that pretty well, do we have is there time about up now? I believe it is. Let's pause here then at the appropriate time at the top of page 8, and God willing, we'll look at this drinking the wrath, the wine of God's wrath. And we'll see also some Old Testament statements that pertain to that John is borrowing from. So appreciate everyone's participation today, the contribution, your input, your thoughts. I certainly, as I've stated before, and I'll repeat it ad infinitum, that I don't have all the answers. I have very few answers, in fact. I know some things that I tend to believe are more reasonable in interpreting Revelation, but it's not the last word. That's why I think we need to study and gain and gather and compare and then arrive at a consensus for ourselves of what we believe is the most reasonable approach to revelation. And for me, it goes back to chapter 1, verse 1.
Swallowed us alive, had it not been the Lord who was on our side. Blessed be the Lord who would not give us up. Blessed be the Lord for his unfailing love. The snare is broken and we have escaped. In the name of the Lord, blessed be the Lord. Had it not been the Lord who was on our side, had it not been the Lord who was on our side, the water would have engulfed us, we would have surely died. Had it not been the Lord who was on our side. Blessed be the Lord who would not give us up. Blessed be the Lord for his unfailing love. The snare is broken and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord. Blessed be the Lord who would not give us up. Blessed be the Lord for his unfailing love. The